something like that. Or in a more sophisticated way, the political view can tell the skeptic, well, you know, perhaps not even I believe in the existence of a moral foundation of human rights, but it is a fact that human rights perform this function in international politics today. It is a fact that they limit national sovereignty. So, what are you exactly skeptical of? Are you skeptical that they perform this function? I mean, just read the newspapers. Are you skeptic of the fact that there is a moral foundation behind this function that they perform? Oh, that's fine. I may be skeptical too, but that doesn't matter, right? So, I guess that the political exponent is going to tell you, yeah, that's just a question for old-fashioned philosophy. I mean, when we do the philosophy of human rights, we don't need to go deeper to this moral level and come up with a final answer to the existence of this moral foundation, because we don't need to look that deep. Now, back to the first part of your question, is this move from how things are to how things should be, which was the last resort move of the political view, another instance of the is-ought fallacy, so moving from how the world is to the way in which the world should be. Now, let me say two things. First, in all fairness, no matter how orthodox I am, I think that there is a way of saying that even orthodoxy risk to violate this condition, to make this fallacy. Because think of, I mean, that's my interpretation of Kant, so be careful. In my interpretation of Kant, the foundation of human dignity is the fact that we are autonomous. So, since we are autonomous beings, and I gave you the argument of the fact of reason in the second critique, I try to convince you that, at least from a practical point of view, we cannot help but thinking ourselves as autonomous beings. It follows that we have dignity. So it follows that there are certain things that should not be done to us, or should be done to us. I mean, there are prescriptive consequences that follow from a description of what we are. So this move from is to ought is not a problem for the political view only. That's the first part. Second part of it, I'm not sure that what's going on here is exactly an instance of the is-ought fallacy. Because what I was saying is that the last resort of the political view is to say, okay, fine, I don't need to be that dependent on how things are today, the way in which they are practiced today. Because the distinction I'm really interested in is the one that puts in one category things that should be of international concern and things that should not be of international concern. In the first category, I'm going to put genocide, ethnic cleansing, torture, these important things that everybody thinks should be protected through human rights. In the other things, equally non-controversial things that nobody thinks should be protected by human rights. Having a faithful partner, having sincere friends, having an extremely good life, stuff like that. Happiness, being happy. Is there a human right to be happy? Okay, so what I'm criticizing here is not that this is an instance of the is-ought fallacy. criticizing is that when you move to the prescriptive level, so things that should be in one category and not in the other, you have to tell me why they should be in one category or not. And I don't see what the political philosopher is allowed to tell me at this point. Because if he tells me, that's how things are, no, you just told me that you don't want to be that close to the practice, to so close, dependent on the practice, and now you go back to the practice. But if he tells me, no, I don't want to go to practice, I want to go to, I don't know, things that are evidently wrong, things that are evidently in the hands of the international community, that's an appeal to, intuitions, is problematic. And if you want to say ethnic cleansing violates the dignity of human rights, being told a lie does not, is first of all is questionable, but secondly, it clearly makes your foundation parasitic on the orthodox foundation. So it's not so much that the is-ought fallacy is a question begging. It's the fact that at one point the political view no longer explains what is the normativity of human rights, just takes it for granted. Something else came to my mind while I was responding to the first part, and now escaped my mind. Well, okay.
Thank you.
Kant, ele tem orthodoxical point of view, in your opinion?
In my opinion, yes. Well, in my opinion, in everybody's opinion, I would say. Yeah, I mean, he has this notion of dignity. He doesn't talk about human rights, obviously, unless very rarely, and most of the times he doesn't talk about human rights, but human right in the singular, Menschenrecht.
He doesn't explain the foundation about this.
Well, no, he has a very strong argument to explain why we have dignity. And I'm going to give you an argument that is similar to Kant, it's not identical to that of Kant, for the same conclusion. But he's a super orthodox, precisely because he cuts deeper than the current orthodoxy, because he doesn't stop at mentioning human dignity, but he explains to you why we have dignity. Now you can like the argument that explains to you why we have dignity, or not like it, but at least it gives you an argument. And the argument is, as I was mentioning before, that we have strong philosophical reasons to believe that we are autonomous. Being autonomous is not being able to do whatever we like, but is to be able to follow moral rules, follow moral law. This is something that makes us special. For him, is clearly distinguishes us from animals, entities with what he calls an arbitrium brutum. So it makes us similar to rational beings, it makes us similar to angels, except that angels do not have a body, therefore they do not have temptations. And so they follow the moral law distinctively and frictionless, without a lot of struggle. But we share with angels our rational nature, so we are capable of following the moral law. So we are capable of agency, of a special kind of agency that silences all our needs or our inclinations or our desires, and makes us capable of following the moral law also in the most difficult circumstances. Remember the famous example that he gives in the groundwork. Let's imagine that an innocent man is threatened by a dictator to give false testimony against an innocent man, if he doesn't give false testimony against that innocent man, he's going to be killed by the despot, by the dictator. And Kant says, nobody knows what we would do in the shoes of this person who is threatened by the despot. Nobody knows whether we would be so courageous to say, fuck you, dictator. No, I'm not going to give false testimony against this innocent man because he's innocent. It's not right to say that he's guilty if he's innocent. So nobody knows what we would do, but we all know that we could say the famous fuck you, dictator. And for him, this is a kind of indication that even when our survival, that is the strongest inclination that we have, the strongest instinct that we have, even when survival is at stake, we can still follow what our reason commands, that is what the moral law commands, in this case, to avoid to give false testimony against this innocent person. And this shows that we are autonomous beings. By being these kind of beings, capable of these special bits of behavior, ipso facto, we are worthy beings. We have a dignity. We stand above the natural world. We stand above nature because we are free. Free at a very, very deep level. Not free in the sense that we can follow our passions. Nobody, is going to tell us which ice cream or which flavor or which partner we have. That's good, that's freedom too, but that's not the freedom I'm talking about. I'm talking about a higher level of freedom, that is autonomy. The fact that at one point I am in charge of my life at a very strong level. The famous poetry by Nelson Mandela, I'm the captain of my soul. That's a Kantian line. I'm the captain of my soul, and up to the point that I can silence the instinct of survival in order to follow the moral law. And for Kant, this is the explanation of why we are entities with dignity, why we have dignity. So it is an argument. Now, again, you may think this argument is wrong, you cannot rely on what he calls the fact of reason, this immediate bindingness for us of the moral law, immediate and inescapable bindingness of the moral law. Fine, but at least it gives an argument. So, yeah, I think he's a super orthodox. That's why I like him.
And you follow him.
Yes, and I'm following him on this, yes.
I've got one question. I'm still not plenty satisfied with how we deal with the political conception.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe even with some Kantian foundations, but which is something you admit and used to criticize this. That in this regard they rely on somehow on a foundation, which may be orthodox or not. Anyway, what I think these philosophers, which are somehow related to political liberalism, can be of any help is to provide some type of common ground to understand how this practice should work. So it's a critical and perspective, and recognize that we should bear in mind that there are some burdens, to use Rawls' terms, burdens of judgment.
Yeah.
And why would that be important? That could provide some justification for human rights, as long as it provides some reasons why they have some normativity. Let me explain, make it clear. So human rights and international institutions claim authority. They claim that they can
Use
create
force.
and use force, okay?
Yeah.
Not norms that are binding, okay? So as long as these norms are binding, they must provide justification for that.
Yeah.
And that I think is a big contribution of this tradition.
Yes.
And to see how this justification may works out is also something that Hegel, for instance, works a lot. I think in also Heiner Forst, which is a critical philosopher, also in South Kantian. So I think this aspect of the political tradition is still to be somehow useful for us, even though it may or not have some deeper foundation.
I see.
And maybe these foundations also could be put in political terms, you see, so that's a second question. For example, if you see people as bearers of dignity, but in a sense they are equal and free, as Ross puts it, that can also be a political foundation, not a metaphysical one.
Yeah.
So, two questions. You
Yeah,
understand?
no, excellent question, both of them. Okay, let me rephrase the first question. First, to understand whether I understood you, and to make other people understand probably better. The first point you make is that, look, be careful to discharge the political view too quickly, because it has a great advantage, and this is that it does not impose on people norms that have been decided by some philosophers in a room, and that, you know, magically they become binding and with consequences for everybody. So the political view avoids this problem by saying pretty much I don't give a shit what philosophers think about human rights, in a sense, because I look at the practice. No?
Yeah,
Am I correct so far?
Yes.
So,
just to be a
Yeah.
little more precise, it's not that I don't give a shit, it's just that this must be translated into some political language, understand?
Right.
Something that all participants may share.
absolutely. And in fact, the last thing I didn't cover of this chapter, because I was tired, is this appeal to global public reason, which is pretty much what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so the idea here would be that in deciding what human rights are, and to explain why they're binding, we are appealing to not our moral beliefs, or our metaphysical position, or our religious tradition, or stuff like that, but we are, in analogy with what happens in political liberalism with public reason, we appeal to political values that we already share, right? So, how does political liberalism works in a nutshell? We stipulate that when deciding about the basic rules of our society, we have to set aside our comprehensive views, so our metaphysical views, our moral views, and so on. And we have to reach this political level of deliberation in which we basically appeal to political values. So, I am a Christian, I may think that we are all equal because we are all offspring of God. You may be an atheist, you don't believe in God, but you can still be committed to the equality of citizens for completely different reasons. But at the political level, we agree. So we want to have a society that is grounded on this idea of equality, for reasons that have nothing to do with my being Christians, you being an atheist, but because we share this political value. Okay? So your suggestion, which is also the suggestion of Joshua Cohen, is why don't we apply this wonderful method of public reason also to human rights. So instead of appealing to the different moral traditions, instead of appealing to the different religions in the world and so on and so forth, we appeal to few political values that have already been, that we already share, that there is reason to believe that people around the world would be in agreement with, even in the extreme case in which they are not perfectly overlapping on their comprehensive views. Okay?
Yeah.
If we do this, we have an instrument that is still critical, in a sense, because we keep a distance from our comprehensive views, so we are still critical about ourselves and the rest of the world. But at the same time, we are not dictating these political norms from above or from the minds of some philosopher or something like that. So basically, it all depends on the existence of some political agreement on these global rules that should be there. Now, two things in response to this very sophisticated version. Actually, thank you very much for bringing this last version of the political view emerge. Two things. One, I could repeat my usual concern that this makes it sound dependent on the existence of a political agreement. What do we do if there are no political values that we share? So I think it's questionable whether, if you look at the average Afghani today, and you go there with the whole list of human rights, he's going to agree with that. So an amount of imposition seems to be unavoidable. So he's going to reply, who the fuck are you to tell me how I have to treat my women, my daughters, and so on and so forth? I mean, I don't share this. Too bad. No, at that point. So so I'm saying we don't have to be too confident that there is this political agreement, especially at the global level. I mean, perhaps there is this political agreement within liberal democratic societies, because we have been, socialized in institutions in which that they teach us, even if you think that blacks should have less rights than whites, do not say that publicly, or do not try to make a political party out of that, because this is unacceptable. So, in your house, with your friends, you can say, these fucking niggers or stuff like that, these are like monkeys and so on and so forth, but when you go public, be careful, because that's not acceptable, that's something simply you cannot do. And therefore, at the political level, there is some agreement, because, there is this constitutional rule that says that we are all equal, we are all equal, fine. This happens in liberal democratic societies. So, I doubt that there is anything like a political agreement at the global level. That's criticism number two. The criticism number one is that, after all, even if there is, it looks like it's dependent on contingencies, on the political agreement that there is not. Concern number three is the following. This idea of distancing yourself from your comprehensive view in order to reach an agreement at the political level, again, is a liberal attitude. We, in liberal societies, are used to make this distinction between the political level and the moral level. But this is quintessentially liberal. Whereas in other traditions, you are expected not to make this distinction. It's almost obligatory that you do not make this distinction. So, my main concern with Cohen and the followers of Rawls is that global public reason is a liberal instrument. That's a methodological concern. You cannot expect a faithful Muslim to come to you and say, you know, I know that Allah says that the Quran says this, but for the sake of, you know, agreement and at the political level, I'm going to concede that perhaps we should introduce the human right not to discriminate between men and women, or not to discriminate. I don't know. I mean, I said Muslim, but any religious fundamentalist is the same, obviously. So this distinction between sacred books and the political level, remember, should, in case of a conflict, should take priority. I mean, that's what Rawls says. No? If there is a conflict with political values and moral values, political values are expected to be stronger. I mean, it seems to me that it's more promising to give a sort of moral argument, to give a moral foundation of human rights that doesn't appeal to this political level, and to make it as compatible as possible to the values, the different metaphysical comprehensive views that are out there in the world. At least that's my strategy. Because I think that global public reason is really not an instrument that is at our disposal if we talk about human rights. So that's concern number 3 about it. But thank you very much for making the best case of the political view much better.
I'm not that content as well.
No,
I just
absolutely.
absolutely.
This shows that everybody should speak for himself. Even if you try to be fair to someone you don't agree with, basically you are going to create a straw man instead of if you go, yeah. Don't tell me you're tired. It's your
You must be tired.
No, I'm not that tired. I'm very bored when I have to talk about things that I've written to give lecture, but you know, like philosophy should be done when there is a discussion. It's much nicer.
There is tomorrow and the day after.
Oh yeah,
tomorrow.
true. Yeah, tomorrow is going to be challenging. So try to come prepared to read the material beforehand, because you know the paper by Waldron is, I mean, challenging. Thank you.
Thank you. Então, amanhã, à mesma hora, no mesmo local. Obrigada.
Where yeah, sit down.
Até agora?
Ela seria mais.
Cheguei no horário. Exaustos?
Será que a gente, Regina, como que a gente faz para ver o que foi gravado? Eu acho que a gente, vamos tirar aqui?